How are we doing today, everyone? If you're watching this video, it's safe to assume that you're ready for what it has to offer. So let's not waste any time. Now, in the previous video, I did indeed say that a great drift is the culmination of good speed, good line, and good angle. But there's one more factor present that is of the utmost importance: how well you chain each of these great drifts together. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. We're also going to briefly talk about some of the different ways to initiate a drift. So first things first, take your 350Z and head to the car settings section. It's finally time to upgrade this thing a bit. Hopefully you have the 68,000 credits I asked you to get. These are the upgrades that we're going to be buying. Racing brakes. I set mine to 7 up front and 5 in the back, but you can do it any way you want. Follow the directions on the left side of the game screen if you aren't sure how to set them up properly for your driving style. Next, in drivetrain, we're getting the twin plate clutch kit and the carbon drive shaft. In power, we're keeping to the cheap components, so get the sports computer, the isometric exhaust manifold, sports catalytic converter, and intake tuning. Finally, in body, we're getting the Stage 3 weight reduction and both the carbon hood and the window weight reduction. Now our car should be ready. So this video is going to be split into two sections, an easy section and a hard section. Anyone who, after watching this, is uncomfortable on the more difficult track can go back and practice this same exact thing on Suzuka East. Anyway, for everyone else, head to Deep Forest Raceway and make sure you have the driving line set to on. Chaining drifts that face in the opposite direction, what I like to call transitional chains, require that in between each corner, you're in a position to make any transitions you need. Using the line can help you visualize where the best place to make the switch is. This can vary depending on the turns in question. If there's an awkward crest in between two corners where you'd normally make the optimal transition, you might have to move the switch to be a bit earlier or later, and knowing the line will help you learn to feel that out. The width of the track can also make a huge difference, as can many other factors like the size and speed of the corners, etc. The other form of chain is what I call a parallel chain, where the turns are going in the same direction, usually with some sort of short straight in between them. Keep in mind really quickly, these terms are not real terms, I just use them as shorthand for myself. I don't know whether these actually have names at all. Anyway, oftentimes the line can be doubly important with a parallel chain drift, because you usually have to exit the first turn in just the right way in order to stay sliding during the straight, while still entering the next turn at the correct speed, angle, and on the right line. When doing a parallel chain between corners, you usually have less influence on how you enter the subsequent turn, since you can't really fling the car in the opposite direction at the most opportune time. If you exit the first corner incorrectly, speed and angle can only influence the car so much to fix things here. Speed can be a big factor in these when they include a longer straight in between. And as such, sometimes it's just not possible to do a proper parallel chain with the power your car has. You'll start to understand it more the more times you practice on various corners. So with that all explained, head into the track, go past the start line and the first turn, stopping just before the shadow of the Gran Turismo banner. When you're ready, start accelerating. Our goal is to try and transition between as many of the upcoming turns as we can, leading up and through the first tunnel. If you think you can go further, then by all means go as far as you can. Otherwise, again, our goal is to get through the corner just before the first tunnel. You should be in about 4th gear when you start drifting, assuming you start at the first left-hand corner. I know this corner is a little bit difficult to drift, because it's not very tight and it's hard to get a good lead up. If you can't get up enough speed for that turn, you can either skip it or start accelerating from further back on the track. Just note, this will be what I consider turn 1. This section has several interesting types of chains within it that will test your ability to make different types of transitions. Most of these corners have banks, meaning you have to really be careful to not transition too deep into the inside of the corner. Doing so could scrub off tons of speed unintentionally, or force you into far too deep of an angle, causing you to hit the inside barrier or spin out. The turns also get progressively tighter and therefore slower, meaning you'll need to find ways to intentionally scrub off some speed, as well as when exactly to do so. There's also a bit of straight piece of road in between corners 2 and 3. This gives you more transition time, but it can also make it difficult to transition smoothly since you have to hold the transition for the whole straight section if you don't want to risk having to make the transition at the last second. Now further on, we get to our corners set up for parallel chains. Start inside the second tunnel and accelerate up the hill. By the top, you should be in 3rd gear. The left-hand turn that suddenly starts going downhill, that's our first corner in this drift. Notice right after it that there's a small straight section, and then another left-hand turn. Together, these form our parallel chain practice area. Managing your speed is key here, because the downhill will make scrubbing speed a bit more difficult. Plus, it's an uneven hill, so your angle can easily get messed up if you're on the wrong section of track at the wrong time. Don't worry if your back wheels go into the grass while trying to chain these 2 corners. We're not looking to get this perfect. We're looking to be able to link the corners, that's it. Note that when any part of your car is in the grass, your steering inputs will be amplified, and that includes extra angle caused by any acceleration. You just have to be delicate. You can always keep more toward the inside of the line during this section, but it'll require more speed and less angle to get across, and then you'll have to immediately scrub off a lot of that speed and add a lot of angle for the second corner. That's therefore a bit more technical, and in some ways more challenging. I know these are both rather difficult feats to accomplish, so if you're having a lot of trouble, go back to Suzuka and practice chains. You can do it just like we did on the first day, but this time while transitioning between the corners instead of just doing them separately. Plus, if you hit the left-hand turn after the S section, you can practice parallel chains here. The outside of the 2 corners here is still paved, meaning even if you take it really wide, you can still make the turn. You can slowly move your line further and further in until you can hit the chain without going off track. So now, we'll briefly talk about the different ways to initiate a drift. The most common is obviously by using the emergency brake, or e-brake. Hitting this locks up the wheels, so it makes initiating a slide really easy. It's the best way to start a drift if you need control over your speed and need to enter the corner perfectly. It can also be used to keep your car going sideways down a straight for a short while, if trying to chain 2 corners with a particularly long section in between them. And it can be used to scrub off speed fairly well. Note, however, that this also takes away a lot of your control. So until you're adept at using it, it's best to just use it to initiate simple drifts by tapping on it for less than a second. Next comes the power slide entrance. This is what you learned in the beginning, where you simply add power and turn into the corner until the car starts to slide. This is particularly effective with mid-range powered cars. Too gutless, and the car won't have the power to initiate the drift very well. Too powerful, and it's incredibly easy to spin the car by adding the power required to break the wheels loose. In my experience, this is best used when you really just want your drifts and chains to be super smooth. It can also be used to enter sweepers cautiously. Finally, it's great at entering drifts without upsetting the balance of the car too much. The last one we'll touch upon is the Scandinavian flick. This is a term that actually comes from rally racing, which has a not so surprising amount in common with drifting. A Scandinavian flick is performed by swinging the car in the opposite direction of the corner, and then turning hard in the proper direction. This quickly upsets the balance of the car and engages a drift. In theory, this seems like a really reckless way of initiating a slide, but it's really good at scrubbing off some speed, getting deep angles, and starting slides in general. But if it backfires, it usually goes horribly wrong. You almost have to think backwards when starting drifts this way. However, if there's one thing it's really good at, it's helping you learn transitional chains. By far the most efficient way to transition between opposite-facing drifts is to use the momentum of your previous drift in tandem with the flick. You never even have to touch the brakes, add unnecessary power, or anything of the sort. The shifting weight will do everything for you. You just drift, flick, etc. Learning the flick through chains, or learning chains through the flick, will end up making you a master of both. As such, it's likely to be a technique you're guaranteed to pick up naturally, and use quite often. I know I do. The homework for this one is to gain the skills needed to do both of the Deep Forest Raceway chains properly. Practice whatever you need to practice to get this done. We're not upgrading our car for next time, but you should start collecting credits anyway, because we'll be basically fully upgrading the vehicle for the final day. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. If you did, please feel free to leave a like. And as always, if you have any questions, ask them below. See you next week for the final 2 videos.